Union. Tom bathed in light. For a short time he no longer knew who he was. He could not open his eyes, but felt his entire body through the warmth that surrounded him. Where was he? Who was he? Tom couldn't answer these questions anymore. He couldn't even think normally because sometimes it felt like time wasn't flowing, but being served to him in little pieces, a staccato of strange moments. His memories. How had he gotten here? His parents had gone to the movies. He had read and then he had been attacked. Where was he? He strained again, wished to open his eyes. He wanted to see where he was, see what was. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he succeeded and opened his eyes. Bright light surrounded his body. Tom wore snow-white clothes, so he couldn't see where his body ended and where the space around him began. Am I dead? This question only crossed his mind for a split second, but in a distorted way he could hear the reverberation of the words through this world like an echo that wanted to taunt him. The answer to his question came as a jolt that ate through his limbs. An eerie roar could be heard, and from one moment to the next, a change swept through the world he was in. The pure light faded somewhat, forming walls and an underground bright and white as snow. Little by little, marble pillars grew up into infinity from the ground that had just been formed, soundlessly, as if they were only shadows. Finally, Tom found himself at one side of a huge hall whose ceiling was not a sky, but a boundless glaring void. The entire place was completely surreal and twisted, and yet somehow it struck Tom as the most natural thing he had ever seen. A feeling of security flowed through him. He wanted to venture between the columns, for he hoped to find something on the other side. Something had to be there, something had to take him further, explain everything. Deep inside, Tom even suspected that his search would not remain fruitless. It was as if an inaudible, alluring melody was calling to him from the other end of the hall, summoning him. But still, he could move only with difficulty. His arms were limp, his legs useless. But he had to get to the other side. He had to get to what was calling for him, what perhaps had always been calling for him. Tom concentrated, and suddenly he was standing at the other end of the hall. The bright wall in front of him was covered with strange signs and symbols, little drawings and formulas that looked jumbled, but somehow also followed an incomprehensible order. He tried to touch them, but Tom felt something behind him. Whatever had been calling him was now nearby. But what would it be? An old man? An idol? A beautiful woman? He simply had to know. But movements were still difficult for him. Tom had to fight, had to force himself to turn around. Slowly he managed to move and searched for the source of the eerie feeling. Then he saw it, hidden behind a pillar, stood the desk. Tom rubbed his eyes, but it was still there. A table of white, finely grained wood stood not 10 meters away from him, half hidden. He strode around the column toward it. Slowly his movements became easier, and his body had finally become accustomed to this strange world. His steps carried him forward. Then he could make out something else. Behind the table sat a being that had the shape of a human, but was made only of blue glow. It floated shimmering up and down behind the table. Tom couldn't make out any detail, couldn't even look directly at the thing for very long because his eyes started to hurt after a few seconds. He was sure the creature came from some faraway place, or had it always been here? Then it began to speak, and it was as if the words came from eternity itself. Although it spoke slowly, it did not seem sluggish or sleepy at all, but exuded a perfection that not even a circle possessed. At the same time, it sounded rigid and impassive.
What are you? Nothing is expected at this point.
Tom wondered what it all meant and finally decided that he should improvise. I'm a little early.
Nothing is too early or too late. Everything here knows when it is time to appear and leave before me. Everything is arranged.
The thing said, echoing. If I'm not wanted, I might as well leave now, Tom suggested and was about to turn around, but he suddenly couldn't move an inch.
No, I did not know you were coming, so you have to stay here. I need to know which one you are.
The creature grew a little taller. Tom began to get restless. My name is Tom Ford, but I want to go back to where I came from. I want to go back to my parents, back to my house, please. He still couldn't move, and so he decided to change the subject. Did you send that fog creature? The being of light paid no attention to him. The thought occurred to Tom that he might be facing God himself or something alike, and he decided to keep his mouth shut. He didn't feel the need to get himself into trouble by making impertinent remarks.
Not God.
It came from the light creature. Tom looked at the being and gave up. What was he supposed to do? If it could read minds, lies were futile. All he could do was wait. Time passed. The creature, slowly, began to pulse. Tom got a bad feeling. After a while, he asked again, "Where am I?" His words faded uselessly into the infinity above him. Would he ever be able to leave this place again? See his parents again? Ever talk to other people again? Or would he be lost in this eternal whiteness? Would he, in the end, go insane? Suddenly, the creature droned, highly focused.
What world are you from and what is your designation?
I already told you my name is Tom Ford. What do you want from me? Tom cried in panic. But the creature continued unmoved, and now anger mixed into its voice. Slowly, it grew to the size of a car.
Your shell must be no more. Which one are you? Why do you still have a shell? I need to know what abstractum you are and what world you are from, or I will have to look it up.
What? Stuttered Tom, but that was as far as he got. Suddenly he felt hot. He saw the light being, which had begun to vibrate, float through the wooden table and glide in his direction. The contours of his counterpart blurred even more, as far as that was possible. For a brief moment it seemed to pause, getting ready for something. Then the thing flew into his face and into his head with a shrill clang. Tom felt a sharp pain on his forehead that slowly grew larger and spread over his body. For a moment he thought he was going to pass out. Then it was over. The light being hovered in front of him again, and as Tom massaged his temple, it spoke at a frantic pace, irritated and clearly displeased.
You do not belong here. You need to get out of here. I will make sure your consciousness splits from your body. Then you are right. But you are still in your shell. That is impossible. How can that happen? Has there been a glitch in the system? Impossible. The system is perfect, planned out. Your presence must be predetermined. It must be. Or it is not, and a mistake has occurred. Yet mistakes are impossible. Or I was not informed that I would be part of the cycle, but I know I am not. This plane has been excluded. It is impossible. There must not be an anomaly.
Then it spoke slowly again, but now threateningly.
An anomaly must be destroyed at all costs. I must erase it. I must destroy it.
Tom had stopped working his temple. The being in front of him was clearly running amok, like a robot whose programming suddenly made no sense anymore, and that was clearly not good. Desperately he tried to turn around, but also prepared himself for the force that held him in place. But it was as if it had simply shut off, and as Tom wrenched himself around with all his might, he stumbled and almost hit the ground. At the last moment he caught himself and fled from the creature's insane voice that rang through the area.
Error. Anomaly, what do you want me to do? I have to get rid of it, but I must not interfere. I must not. But why am I suddenly a part of the cycle? This is not possible.
Tom ran, and he knew that the outcome of this race would determine his fate. He sprinted between the pillars, always in one direction, but when he turned around, he saw that he was not really making any progress at all. The pillars flew past Tom, but the creature remained hovering in the same place, not 5 meters away. It was still screaming,
"What is this? I cannot understand this,"
behind him, but then Tom heard another voice. A voice that came not from the hall, but from within. It sounded strangely dark and hazy, as if it were coming from an old radio.
"You must leave or you will perish. The Guardian will have made up its mind in a moment. You must come to me immediately."
But how? Tom thought, expecting no answer. He suspected that he was just going mad. But the answer came so quickly that it was uncanny.
"You have to want it with every thought. You've done it before, when you came into the hall, when you wanted to badly open your eyes. And another time, when you started moving. Your mind is powerful, especially in this place."
Okay, I'll try. I'll do my best, Tom thought in panic. He began to focus. He had to get away. He had to get to the voice, just the voice. It was the only chance, his lifeline. He just had to get to the voice, and as if to spur him on, he heard the entity behind him roar that it would now come to erase him from existence. His thoughts suddenly began to spin strangely, and the world around him also spun, blurred, and he felt nauseous. Quickly, he squeezed his eyes shut. Finally, slowly, he came to rest. Was he with the voice? Tom fell to his knees, gasping. An unpleasant numbness filled him. But he was somewhere else now, He was safe for the time being. He opened his eyes to see where he had landed. Tom was in almost the same surroundings as he had been a few moments ago, but some crucial things had definitely changed. His clothes were still white, but not the world around him. It was black as night, from the ground to the infinities above him. And yet he could see everything, because there was still a little light, but even that was gloomy. It was a little reminiscent of dusk. The walls had disappeared and the columns stretched as far as he could see. They were now made of a dark material, smooth and radiating a coldness that made Tom shiver. He looked around as he searched for the cause of the voice in his head. Had he not ended up with it, after all? Tom suddenly noticed distraught, dark, blurry shadows moving around him in the darkness. They kept some distance, almost as if they couldn't get to him, but were still disturbingly close. The origin of the voice, on the other hand, he could not see. Or had it come from one of the shadows? Somehow Tom doubted it. He decided to go look for the voice and was soon wandering through the light that ran through this world as if it were just passing through. To his dismay, Tom simply could not find anything except the shadows around him. A nameless fear befell him. What if this was a trap? What if there was no one waiting for him here? If this was all just a trick by the light being to wipe him out? But to what end? New figures kept appearing at the edge of his field of vision. Tom's fear was now joined by restlessness. He looked around once more, searching, and was about to give up in resignation when he heard the voice again, this time stronger and clearer.
You are near. I am here, but you cannot see me yet. If you keep moving forward, you will meet me soon. You need not be afraid. In fact, you are the only being who need not be afraid here.
Tom felt new courage rising through these words and walked energetically through the forest of pillars. Further and further his feet carried him. He noticed that more and more shadows were gathering around him. Slowly he felt a deep sadness mixed with an abysmal despair. The terrible emotions seemed to seep out of the many shadows directly into his soul. Tom did not let this deter him. He mustered all his courage and quickened his steps. How long he ran, he could not say. Nothing seemed to change as far as he walked. Only pitch-black columns, dim twilight, and strange shapes. Then he had reached his destination. Between four of the gigantic columns hovered a cloud of mist, black like the surroundings, but it looked familiar. It was the same thick fog that had flooded Tom's street. The mist rose, collapsed, and bent toward Tom. Two red, pulsing slits appeared at his eye level, eyeing him excitedly. Tom reckoned that the fog would spread like a rapidly growing cancer, that a grey goblin or something worse would appear, something he could not destroy here in a world of darkness. But nothing of the sort happened. The creature simply hovered in front of him. Then, finally, It opened its mouth and spoke in a booming voice.
So you came, Tom Ford. I was hoping you'd jump at the chance.
Tom backed away a step and raised his fists. Then he said defiantly, I will fight if I must, to the end. And whatever chance I took shouldn't matter to you. The creature laughed and Tom backed away even further, abandoning his attack posture and ready to take flight. But the creature did not make a move.
I'll explain it to you if you'll allow me, but you must try to understand me.
Tom thought he had misheard. Blind rage boiled up inside him. Then he shouted at the creature. Understand you? You murdered Walter, killed me too, and we were probably not the only victims. How dare you ask me to understand?
You hated that boy. You would have even been ready to murder him yourself in a few years at the latest.
The creature replied. No, I wouldn't have, Tom said firmly. The creature suddenly grinned. Its mouth was as red as its eyes.
I know. A little wicked joke on my part. Sorry, old habit. But you just named the crucial fact. The fact because of which all this is happening now. Why we're both here.
And what fact is that?
I didn't manage to kill you like I was meant to.
And what is that supposed to mean? That you failed miserably? Tom hissed.
Yes, just that.
The creature replied.
You were supposed to stay in the lights. I should then have extinguished the lights and then, well, this shouldn't have happened.
Now you're starting to sound like the creature from before, Tom scoffed.
Yes, that is true, but I'll explain as I said. It was my fate that I pierce and murder you.
Fate? What kind of fate? You're talking crazy.
No, everything about our worlds, our lives, our stories is predetermined. You have to think of it this way, Tom Ford. Everything is made up of a great cycle, like a mighty mechanical clock. Every world is connected to the other worlds, and every life goes through the same cycle. Being born, living, dying, over and over again from the beginning. Each time in such a way as it was determined at the beginning of all things. Your soul has dwelt in many bodies, thousands of times.
My soul? I always thought there were no souls. That it's just rubbish we tell ourselves so we won't be afraid of the void. Tom countered but wasn't convinced. This place, after all, indicated that there was more than he had assumed. Tom, oddly enough, had almost forgotten that the creature in front of him had wanted to kill him some time ago, and was also pretty much the worst being he had ever seen. But he also felt that this assessment was no longer true.
I just wanted to state the facts in a way you could understand. Abstractum, that's the name of this thing you know as soul. I thought the word soul would at least be something familiar in this madness and put your mind at ease a bit.
The creature said, sounding almost pitiful. Wait, abstractum? That's what the thing earlier said as well.
The Guardian, yes, he did. It's the usual procedure. The Guardian assigns the souls that have just died to their new bodies. He knows the time of death of each being.
Slowly, Tom understood. I think I get it. It knew no soul would come, but still I appeared. That's why it was so confused, but people die all the time, and if you say I should have died differently, surely the Guardian would have waited for me for a while and understood by then.
Time passes differently here,
Was all the mist creature answered. But now everything has somehow been messed up. Is that why the Guardian wants to kill me? To somehow fix fate? Can I even die again? The creature looked at him strangely. The realization hit Tom like a hammer blow. The being said I'm still in my shell. Does that mean I'm not dead, am I? He asked slowly.
No, that's the problem. And the Guardian didn't just want to kill you just now. He wanted to erase your soul from existence.
Noticing Tom's questioning look, the being added,
Existence is the umbrella term for everything that is, all worlds. The big picture, you might say. But I want to get to why I called you. It's very important.
I guess that would be appropriate. I've been asking myself all along anyway, why the hell did you help me?
When you succeeded in destroying me, I was ejected from existence. I shouldn't have died, probably because of that.
Are you kidding me? Everything is just getting crazier and crazier. That can happen? Falling out of existence? That sounds so weird.
Apparently, I don't know how or why it happened, but the fact is that it did. The last time we saw each other, I was a thoroughly evil being, but after I came back, I changed. I understood. I learned things. For example, what existence is, what the Guardian is, how an abstractum works, how everything works. I don't know why. I don't remember where I was when I walked beyond everything. But I am no longer a part of the dark world. Maybe that is what made me evil in the first place. Either way, I don't belong anywhere now.
So you regret what you did? Tom probed.
Yes, even if part of me doesn't understand why. I'm different now. In some ways, I even feel like something that's more than I was before. Each of us is now something impossible. We are now dependent on each other. You have to escape the Guardian, and I don't want to stay here either.
But you can just leave. I will always have to run away from the Guardian. So, what do you want from me? Tom asked.
Wrong. I can't leave here. Unlike you, I have died. This is the afterlife of my world. This is where corrupt souls come to be purified. Purified through millennia of isolation, so they can be sent on to other worlds. And I was very corrupt. But I want to leave. I want to be free again, and you should also leave. The Guardian can't do anything to you outside these places. His power is not meant for that. He cannot become part of the worlds themselves and can only do his work here. But there is a way we can both be helped.
The mist creature whispered. How can we both escape? Tom asked with a queasy feeling in his stomach.
I will take up residence in your mind. Then, with the help of my newfound knowledge, I will get us both out of here.
Excuse me? Are you trying to take me over somehow?
No, only travel with you, and I will be able to give you advice.
The creature explained. Advice? For what? And for how long? Tom asked, confused.
That which has changed fate is more powerful than anything you can imagine. I know one thing. We must drive the rest of my kind from your world. They do not belong there. There is a price to pay. I will probably always be in your head. But look on the bright side. You will have special abilities after merging my abilities. Some of them. And you should also realize, if we don't ally, we'll both end up badly.
The creature replied. You tell me some bullshit and expect me to let you into my head? Really? I don't believe a word you say, Tom said firmly. But inside he was unsure. What if he would be stuck here for all eternity? Or worse, if the Guardian discovered him? Would he disappear forever? Would everything he had done and experienced also fade away? The shadow seemed to sense his thoughts.
You want to become meaningless? If the Guardian catches up with you here in this hell, then not only will you simply not live on, everyone who knew you will slowly forget you were ever there, as if you were just unimportant dust.
It's my life. I'll find a way. But Tom could not lie to himself. Fear crept into his limbs, tugged at his guts. He had to swallow.
Don't be a fool. We've got to get out of here.
What's your name? Tom asked in an attempt to make the monster a little more human. Maybe they had to work together. Maybe there really was no other way.
I have had many names, but I'd prefer you call me Farazan.
Farazan? Well, Farazan, what? Before Tom had completed the sentence, he sensed the approach of danger in the distance. An immeasurable danger. The Guardian. He could no longer stop the fear that had slowly welled up inside him. It flooded all his senses. Tom didn't want to fade. He wanted to stay, to see his parents again. Wanted to tell Walter's parents what had happened to their son. Yes, do it, Tom said shakily. He didn't know if he was making the right decision, if he would ever spend another quiet minute with this thing in his head. But he wanted to continue to exist.
Very well, but I must warn you, I will lose my knowledge of everything beyond existence. Already, most of it has faded. But in one respect I can assure you, I will not become evil again.
Pharazôn explained.
I will now begin. It's best if you distract yourself a bit, then I'll have an easier time.
It was hard for Tom not to think about what was ahead of him. Who are these shadows? He asked to distract himself.
They are the corrupt souls who are being punished. They must linger here for millennia until their deeds fade.
Tom closed his eyes, feeling his brain begin to throb as the shadow entered him. He tried to keep his mind on the shades around him and the noise in the distance. If it would work, he would. Then he heard Pharazôn's unmistakable voice in his head.
Are you ready to go back?
Yes, I am, Tom replied, relieved. Then he noticed his body dissolving into infinity, merging with the surroundings and finally receding into his own world through an indescribable transformation. While he felt that his body seemed extremely happy to be back, he lost consciousness again.